Deep within a dark vault lies an ancient map, worn and weathered, penned by the greatest explorer in history. It has been forgotten for hundreds of years, but the knowledge that it contains is of titanic importance. A group of intrepid warriors seek to travel the plains of the cosmos in search of a legendary artifact, and only this map can tell them how. Filled with secrets and hidden away, it's their only chance for safe passage into the wide universe. Hello adventurers and welcome back to the Red Quills. My name is Ryan and we are venturing out into the cosmos for this series, creating maps of the world and its place in the stars as we map for the adventures of a high-level party. Now, I've mapped a lot of smaller locations in the past, particularly kingdoms and realms and dungeons and cities, but I've never actually mapped the big pictures like the world or the cosmos. And in this series, I'm going to be looking at how you can create maps which are not only useful to you in creating and exploring your world, but can also be given to your players to help them understand their place in a wider cosmos. I'll be creating world maps, cosmological maps, world tree maps, and more, and I'll be tying them in together into my own world of Araya, on which my Atlas project is focused. Alright, let's talk world maps. Because when you're running a D&D campaign early on, you don't really need a world map. I know that many DMs start by outlining their world, and that's not wrong to do, but in many cases it's unnecessary. If you're running a campaign for a party that starts at level 1 and only goes to level 5, you're not going to have time to explore the entire world. For me, having run my own campaign now for 5 years and counting, these maps in this series are my first attempt to create my world map, because I never really needed it. But now, as my players are getting past level 16 and into the higher levels, they're starting to ask awkward questions about how the rest of the world is constructed, about what its history is like, and why all of these mythological events only take place within about a 500-mile radius. So this is my first real attempt to start to measure and illustrate the rest of the world and its history. And I'm going to use these maps to give myself not only a basis of understanding and a jumping point to talking about more of the history of this cosmos, but also to lay in clues as to how they can find out this information from future maps. Because there's not just a whole world out there to explore, there's more of a universe, a cosmos for them to venture out into and see what they can find. The elemental planes and the other planes of existence are a fact in Dungeons & Dragons, as so many of the various spells and creatures refer to them for their origins and their powers. And while there's some leeway in how that you specifically explore that and tie it into your own world, planes are something that every dungeon master running a campaign for long enough will need to address. So today, I'm going to create not just a reference map for myself, but a handout map, something that I can give to my players. They're going to want to start voyaging out into the realms of the planes, and they're going to want a guide to do that. So I'm going to create a map that will tell them how to get out there and warn them about the dangers. And I'm going to use some special ink tools from the Shop of Many Things to hide some clues in the handout so that I can reveal things later on. It's a two-stage map, so that when I give it to them first, it's a world-building tool, and then later on, when they discover its secrets, it can be used as a guide. But first, as I start to outline the shape of the map and do the illustration of the world, let's talk about the history of planes in Dungeons & Dragons and our own history. So different planes of existence have been a concept that's been around for a very long time. And when you talk about esoteric cosmology, it deals with the ideas of having different interconnected planes of reality. It's a kind of theology and philosophy that approaches the world. Esotericism is the concept that there are spiritual fundamental truths that are known to only a select few, dealing with the reality of the world. And in this case, that the world as we know it is influenced by planes of matter and energy that permeate and encompass everything that we know. And now, Gary Gygax introduced the first concepts of the cosmology of the planes for Dungeons & Dragons in 1977, and even the Player's Handbook in 1978 had details on how this universe of D&D was constructed of sort of overlapping cosmic planes. When they introduced the Immortal rules in 1986, they introduced even more rules about the presence of the connecting astral plane and how large the various planes are. And then they went into Spelljammer when they launched in '89. They started to discuss how you could use planar travel to hop between settings like Greyhawk and the Forgotten Realms, which were in the same cosmos via the astral plane. Now, D&D has always had a fairly loose approach to conceptualizing planar travel for D&D. It gives examples, but in general it purposely avoids giving a definitive set of rules so that dungeon masters as individuals can work out their own stories and mechanics for their players as they explore. And that's fine for me, and I think that works really well if you're going through and you're creating your own map. A map allows you to tell your players what the rules of your world are and define how they can explore it. Generally speaking, D&D has changed the idea of its cosmology several times, and different handbooks and different sets of rules over the years have used different concepts of cosmology. For 5e, they use the Great Wheel idea, where you have a material plane in the beginning, you have the interconnecting planes of the ethereal and the astral planes, you have the shadow dimensions of the Feywild and the Shadowfell, which overlap on the material plane. You have the inner elemental planes, and you have the outer planes, which are associated with the alignment chart. And there's a lot of different lore about the inhabitants of the outer planes and the inner planes and how they all connect to one another. And in fact, there's so much lore that it can get a little bit confusing and certainly a little bit intimidating for new DMs. So if you've come into this and you have no idea how it works, you don't know the history of it, then that's absolutely fine. I'm not here to give you a map. I'm here to tell you how to make your own. Now, I've already begun here to create this map, and as you can see, I've started quite early on with a weathered map, which is very, very easy to make. I weathered this one just using T, and it's such a boring process that I didn't include it in this video. If you want a tutorial on how to make a weathered piece of paper, stick one in the comments. I just didn't think it was strictly necessary. I would always recommend T for weathering maps, and then I actually ironed this particular piece of paper so that it lay flat before I started working on it. And then I'm going to start using dark watercolors to outline the main circular material plane as the inhabitants know it, and then the overlapping fundamental planes. Because this is a weathered map, as I've done weathered maps in the past, I'm going to be using muted colors, in this case a brown, and I'm going to show how the main material plane is the largest, and then the significance of the other planes by the size of their circles. But we'll get to that more in a moment. I'm going to take a leaf from the direction that DMs can come up with their own mechanics and stories, and I'm going to make my world have 6 elemental planes. It's going to have fire, air, water, earth, and then life and death, the other 2 elements, which account for the existence of the heavens and the hells. Rather than having a lot of exterior, outer planes that are associated with alignments that explain where the spirits go, I'm going to narrow that down to 2 because I don't want to make my world too complicated. I'm going to have those elements of life and death account for the existence of things like celestials and demons and devils. And they are also where spirits go to after death. I mean, Dante came up with it a long time ago, and I don't see any real reason to overthink that particular part of mythology in this case. Now I'm going to use fine liner pens for this map of various thicknesses, and the materials are all in the description below, but generally speaking I use the same thicknesses for all of my maps, which are a 0.6mm, a 0.4mm, a 0.2mm, and a 0.1mm. The style that I'm using here is based on the Renaissance maps that I looked up, and I'm using this circular shape based on the maps of Jainism that I found when I was researching the various depictions of planar realities. I quite like the way that it looked, but I didn't want this map to be too illustrated. I want it to be an approachable style for anyone who's coming to this tutorial to try to recreate themselves. Now this is all fairly simple. The outcome later on looks quite nice, it looks very complicated, but if you take this tutorial step by step, it should be easy for you. Outline them first with the watercolors, go through in the central plane with the fine liner pens, then you go through and you label everything. Same with the fine liners. I'm going to be deliberately introducing inaccuracies in this map. They're not lies, so that they won't necessarily get confused. But the style of a Renaissance map that I've chosen here deliberately implies that there are things that the map maker doesn't know. Anyone who's seen a Renaissance map and is familiar with an actual map of the world knows that the Renaissance maps don't look anything like how the world actually looks. Even Mercator maps don't really look the way the world looks. But by making the map in that style, it's subconsciously going to tell the players that this doesn't necessarily include true facts. This is just an interpretation of the world. And later on, when I introduce a map of the world, I can add details in. It doesn't lie about anything, but there are shortcomings. And I can flesh out more of the world later. I can give myself the opportunity to add in some story tie-ins that I can come up with in response to their exploration, because that is always the best tact to take. You want to be able to riff with them. You want to be able to take inspiration from their ideas. You want to be able to improvise later on. So by creating a map that's in a style that deliberately implies that there are things that the map maker himself didn't know, we can add those in later. And then finally, I'm going to use the elemental ink pens from the Shop of Many Things. I'm going to use them to add some clues in for them to explore the world. Now, the elemental ink, for those who aren't familiar with them, they disappear when heat is added and they reappear when the map is cooled down. It's amazing for hiding details in the map, and I think it particularly works in an elemental planes map. So in this particular case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use it to write warnings in the borders of the map so that people who are eager to explore the elemental planes have some forewarning about how dangerous and deadly it can be. And I'm also going to use them where the planes overlap the material plane on the map to show where the locations of portals to the elemental planes might be. At least 2 per plane, so that if the players don't have access to one of the planar travel spells, they can go to those locations and access them directly. Now, using the elemental ink pens actually gives the map 2 uses. The first is as an understanding of how the cosmos is constructed, of the cosmology of the world. It makes them understand what particular model that I'm using, because there are so many different models that D&D has used over the years, they have no idea which one I'm going with. And the second use of the map is as a guide and as a warning. By hiding in these specific writings about heading out of the material plane and where you can access it, it gives them an understanding of what they're in for and a direction to move in later on. So why don't we give an example now of how this map can be made and encountered and used in world? Because we're keen not only to make these maps, but play with them. Let's start with a classic. The world is in great danger. The Pantheon wars are raging across the world. New gods are springing up wherever new followers can be found, and while natural disasters lay waste to continents and armies of inquisitors try to wipe out worshippers wherever they can find them, there is no solution to this conflict to be found in the mortal world. But legends tell of the Well of Ages, a legendary spring which grants the drinker immunity to the powers of the gods. Should a warrior drink the water of the well, they would be able to stand against the vainglorious gods, facing only what mortal threats that god can summon. However, the well has been lost for long ages, cast out into the other planes of existence by the very gods that it defends against. It is clear a group of brave and foolish warriors must venture out into the dangers of the cosmos, drink of the waters, and come back to defend the worshippers from their gods. It is said that there are many entrances to the other planes of existence, the hells of Infernus, the paradises of Celestis, and the roiling storms of the planes of the 4 elements. After a long search, they hear a rumor that a map of the planes was made long ago by the ancient explorer Isthmenes. The map has the locations of the plane's intersections and clues about how to track down the well. They need only now find the map, held deep within the vaults of the Bank of Indusal, the most secure location in the world. Now, a good map is a combination of history, mythology, and speculation, and that mixture is what allows a good DM to create a tool for storytelling. And this map was very easy to make, and it looks great, and what's more, it gives several layers of clues to reveal over time, as well as stages of a quest to find it. Now, this map is for my own world, and while it references the Shadowfell and the Feywilds, the astral realms and the ethereal plane, it only really deals with the 6 elemental planes of my cosmos: fire, air, water, earth, and the planes of life and death, Celestis and Infernus. And the tools are from the Shop of Many Things. If you liked the look of them, if you want to make your own, they made this a fantastic map. They're a great tool. They work well, they vanish fully when heated, and they reappear quite easily. I'm keen to show this to my players and see what they can figure out. If you want to get the pens yourself, I'm actually doing an affiliation with the Shop of Many Things. The link is in the description below. If you use the code, you can get the pens for free. You need only pay for shipping, and if you buy anything else, you'll help me at the Red Quills to make more of these videos. So please consider it. Check out the links below. If you have your own realm projects that you're working on, please show me and my fellow map makers on the Red Quills Discord. The link is also in the description, and take a look at my Patreon if you want to download the digital version of this map to use it as a reference for your own world. And as always, if you've got thoughts, inspiration, or questions, leave a comment below. Please like and subscribe for more map making tutorials. Thank you for watching, and I'll be back next week.